protecting and serving their communities, often at great risk to themselves. What I'd like to do here is start with a few remarks about the order that the President mentioned to ensure the availability of critical medical and health supplies from hoarding and price gouging. On March 18th, the President issued Executive Order 13909 invoking the Defense Production Act with respect to the health and medical resources needed to respond to the spread of COVID-19, including PPE and ventilators. We have started to see some evidence of potential hoarding and price gouging. And so earlier today, the President signed a second executive order providing the authority to address, if it becomes necessary, hoarding that threatens the supply of those necessary health and medical resources. Under Section 102 of the Defense Production Act, the President is authorized to prohibit the hoarding of needed resources by designating those materials as scarce or as materials whose supply would be threatened by persons accumulating excessive amounts. Once specific materials are so designated, persons are prohibited from accumulating those items in excess of reasonable personal or business needs, or for the purpose of selling them in excess of prevailing market prices. It is a crime to engage in prohibited activity. In today's executive order, the President is delegating to the Secretary of HHS this authority to protect against hoarding by designating these critical items. Now, no items have been designated yet. The Department of Justice is going to be working with HHS to identify cases where hoarding may be impeding the supply of health and medical resources needed to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we convened our first lead prosecutor who will be responsible in that district for pursuing these cases. I also want to say that we have not waited for this order to be signed. As we have received evidence recently, we have already initiated investigations of activities that are disrupting the supply chain and suggestive of hoarding. I want to stress that we're not talking about consumers or businesses stockpiling supplies for their own operations. We're talking about people hoarding these goods and materials on an industrial scale for the purpose of manipulating the market and ultimately deriving windfall profits. If you have a big supply of toilet paper in your house, this is not something you have to worry about. But if you are sitting on a warehouse with masks, surgical masks, you will be hearing a knock on your door. So with that, Mr. President, thank you very much. Deborah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. To start, I want to really thank all the ministers of health around the world who have been sending us their data despite the fight that they're in themselves.
This is Deborah Burks. She is one of the response coordinators for the White House Coronavirus Task Force.
Data, which is really very critical because when you're in the midst of this level of fight that many of the European countries are, following mortality data will give you the best insight right now on how the epidemic is proceeding in those countries because they really can't be testing at the level to really understand the depth and breadth of their new cases. In the mortality data that has been provided to us, there has been no child under 15 that has succumbed to the virus in Europe. There was the one 14-year-old in China. So we still see that there is less severity of all the mortality coming out of Europe in general is over 50 and pre-existing conditions. The pre-existing condition piece still holds in Italy, with the majority of the mortality having 3 or more pre-existing conditions. I think this is reassuring to all of us, but it doesn't change the need to continue to protect the elderly. And in order to protect the elderly, we all need to continue to do the President's directives and guidance for the next week of the 15-day challenge. Finally, I wanted to really close by thanking the laboratory personnel that have been at the front lines. 250,000 tests have been run in the last 7 days. This happened because these large commercial laboratories are doing round-the-clock runs. And remember, all of them are being exposed to the virus in the same way from the swabs. Yet tirelessly, they have worked on and on to get those results available. They are still getting more tests than they can run per day. That's because we were primarily expanded into what we call the Roche high throughput tri-core machine. Those results have been getting to the clients, and we've asked them to prioritize hospitalized patients. There was a breakthrough today, and I think you'll see this from the FDA, for all of those of you who are waiting for self-swabbing options. Those are going to be available sometime this week to be able to individuals do their own tests. That said, remember, these platforms are keeping up with those who need to be COVID. So that will be critical.
All right, we are going to turn now to Governor Gavin Newsom. You've been listening to President Trump, Attorney General Bill Barr, and others from the White House task force briefing on the coronavirus response. Let's hear what Governor Gavin Newsom has to say.
Stay away orders against essential versus non-essential settings throughout the United States. This has been a very challenging time, and it's a time like this where we're filled with anxiety, filled with a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and it's understandable. People have a mindset of scarcity. You see that manifested in some of the purchasing decisions people are making, where they're overly indulged and getting a little more bread than they may need, a little bit more toilet paper than they may need, and the like. At the same time, it is a remarkable moment to be candid with you, and I cannot express more gratitude. At the same time, we're struggling through this moment, and that is the incredible mindset that also persists, not just here in California, but across this country. And it's a mindset of abundance of our belief that we can not only get through this, but in our capacity to meet this moment together. Let me tell you a little bit what I mean. I've had just in the last 48 hours the opportunity to speak to more scientists, more researchers, more engineers, more Nobel laureates, more CEOs of companies large and small than I have quite literally